people with so much more money than the average person spending somebody's yearly salary on their own clothes without feeling that they have to apologise or explain.
The bill clearly conflicts with the Equality Act and would have repercussions for women.
I just feel like I'm not getting anywhere with trying to get that from...
Rosie Duffield has dropped a political bombshell. Once a firm ally of Keir Starmer, she's stepped away, and her resignation letter pulls no punches, describing a Labour Party strained by internal tension, accusations of hypocrisy, and promises that failed to materialise. What pushed her to this point? A staggering £22 billion overspend that sent morale among Labour MPs crashing and exposed serious cracks beneath the surface. This isn't a minor dispute, it's a warning sign. In 2017, Duffield stunned the nation by capturing Canterbury from the Conservatives after nearly a century of control, a victory that reshaped expectations overnight. A single mother and former teaching assistant, she rose quickly, earning recognition for her advocacy on women's rights and social justice. Known for her direct style and strong connection with voters, Duffield built her reputation on clarity and conviction. Now, her departure casts a sharp spotlight on Labour's direction, and whether the party can steady itself under growing pressure.
UK Labour MP Rosie Duffield has quit the party, criticising the Prime Minister in her resignation letter.
She specifically had choice words for Sir Keir Starmer himself. But what is surprising is the tone and strength of this letter, which is savage.
She's accusing Keir Starmer of hypocrisy after he accepted thousands of pounds worth of free gifts.
Life for Rosie Duffield in a traditionally conservative stronghold was never going to be comfortable. In Canterbury, where long-standing Tory loyalty still ran deep, she had to fight for every ounce of credibility, balancing local priorities with party expectations and proving she belonged. When Keir Starmer took control of Labour, Duffield backed him without hesitation, convinced he could steady the ship and broaden the party's appeal. Her agenda closely mirrored Labour's pledges, strengthening the NHS, securing better education funding, and confronting inequality head-on. As her national profile expanded, so did her influence, emerging as a high-profile voice on women's rights, and a politician unafraid to challenge sensitive debates directly.
I don't think her characterisation of the Prime Minister is right. I think he's motivated by public service.
She said his recent decisions over scrapping the winter fuel payment for pensioners as cruel. She says they are cruel and unnecessary.
There have been campaign contributions around presentation. There's nothing new or unusual about those.
Her position on gender self-identification placed Rosie Duffield on a collision course with parts of her own party, even as it earned respect from supporters who saw her stance as grounded and principled. But while her profile strengthened, doubts quietly gathered. The realities of party leadership, the slow grind of reform, and the relentless pressure to follow the official line began to weigh on her, raising serious questions about whether Labour was honouring the commitments it once championed. Still, Duffield's voice only grew louder, a determined advocate on domestic abuse, women's rights, and equality, commanding attention well beyond party lines. Yet with greater influence came sharper scrutiny, and the road ahead grew more unforgiving, setting the stage for tensions that would strain alliances, test convictions, and culminate in one of the most striking resignations in recent British political memory. As the true state of the public finances came into focus, MPs like Rosie Duffield were forced into a brutal dilemma: defend the promises that powered their campaign, or confront the hard limits of economic reality. Labour's victory celebrations were still echoing, with Keir Starmer pledging a stronger NHS, renewed investment in education, and decisive action on inequality. Supporters cheered in the streets, convinced a new chapter had begun, unaware that serious financial strain was already looming. Behind closed doors, optimism gave way to shock as Treasury officials laid out the numbers, and the new Chancellor absorbed the impact, a staggering £22 billion overspend inherited from the previous government. This wasn't a routine budget gap. It was a fiscal jolt that threatened to upend expectations and put immediate pressure on every pledge that had just been made. The scale of the problem was staggering, a shortfall that risked driving the deficit up by roughly 25% in a single year. The shock rippled through Labour's ranks. How could sweeping promises survive under that weight? MPs who had campaigned on ambitious reform were suddenly staring down unforgiving economic limits. For Rosie Duffield and colleagues defending traditionally conservative seats, the pressure was even sharper. The prospect of returning to voters without tangible progress felt politically and personally devastating. As party leaders locked themselves into urgent strategy sessions, hard choices crowded the table: which pledges to protect, which to postpone, and which to quietly shelve. Every concession strained unity further, and murmurs of frustration echoed through Westminster. For Duffield, it became more than strategy. It was a profound moral test, balancing loyalty to her party against accountability to the people who sent her there. For Rosie Duffield, the choice was stark: stand firm on principle and risk deep financial fallout, or accept painful cuts and undermine the commitments she had made to voters. Early signs of dissent surfaced as Labour MPs came under relentless media scrutiny, and the unity that defined election night quickly dissolved into tension as the weight of governing settled in. Duffield reached a defining crossroads, her loyalty tested in ways she had never faced before, aware that the decisions ahead would shape not only her future but the trajectory of Labour itself. As ambitious pledges began to unravel, the party that had ridden a wave of optimism was forced into uneasy reversals. Keir Starmer's leadership, once praised as steady and forward-looking, increasingly appeared reactive, leaving MPs like Duffield to defend policies that clashed with the very promises that had carried them into power. For Rosie Duffield, the conflict cut deep. The women's rights and social justice causes she had championed with conviction now seemed sidelined, forcing her to question the path of the very party she had devoted herself to. At the center of Labour's leadership, the focus appeared to drift toward managing pressure and placating factions rather than defending core principles, and the widening gap between rhetoric and reality became harder to ignore. Duffield watched with growing frustration as the movement she once trusted began to mirror the same political habits it had condemned from opposition benches. The contradiction weighed on her. Weeks passed, and the internal strain intensified, loyalty to her party pulling one way, loyalty to her constituents, and her own standards pulling the other. The tipping point arrived during a heated Commons debate, when colleagues rose to justify yet another policy reversal, and the tension she had carried for months finally reached its limit. In that moment, something shifted for Rosie Duffield, a realization that she could no longer stand behind what felt increasingly indefensible. "I just thought, I can't do this," she later admitted. As she wrestled with the weight of breaking ranks, another controversy erupted, pushing both her and Labour toward a critical edge. Would her departure trigger a wider reckoning, or would the ranks hold firm? Against a backdrop of policy reversals and strained credibility, fresh scrutiny fell on Keir Starmer, the leader who had pledged to restore integrity to British politics. Reports revealed he had accepted £32,000 worth of designer clothing from a single donor, igniting debate across Westminster. Further disclosures showed he had received more gifts and hospitality than any other MP during his leadership, totaling around £17,000 in additional benefits. The optics were stark, intensifying pressure on a party already battling accusations of drifting from its founding principles. The scale of these perks threw Keir Starmer's judgment and integrity into sharp question. The list read like a celebrity shopping spree. Lord Wyhard Ollie donated £16,200 for work clothing and £3,285 for multiple pairs of glasses, while Starmer himself received VIP tickets to a Taylor Swift concert at Wembley valued at £4,000. The hypocrisy was impossible to ignore. The very leader, who had spent years denouncing conservative corruption, now accepted gifts worth more than double the next highest recipient. Claiming the gifts were within the rules barely dampened public outrage. Social media erupted, memes of Starmer in designer suits went viral, and commentators questioned his credibility on ethics. Headlines branded Labour as the freebie kings, and for MPs like Rosie Duffield, already weary and disillusioned, it became the final straw, a breaking point she could no longer ignore. Morale plunged and loyalty faltered as MPs struggled to reconcile a leader preaching fiscal responsibility while accepting lavish perks. Eyes turned to the backbench, and for Rosie Duffield, already shaken by the £22 billion overspent in Starmer's mounting scandals, the moment for a decision arrived. Late into the night, she confided in trusted colleagues, torn between allegiance to her party and fidelity to her own principles. Could she defend a party abandoning the values that had brought her to Westminster? The stakes were high. Resigning could jeopardize her career, but conscience won out. In the end, Duffield signed a resignation letter that cut to the core, a sharp condemnation of Starmer's leadership, highlighting policy reversals, the fiscal mismanagement, and the controversy over lavish gifts. The news exploded across the political landscape. Labour's fragile unity was exposed, and public scrutiny intensified as Rosie Duffield questioning Keir Starmer.